Yep, it's happened again. You know, I'm starting to run out of sufficient adjectives to describe the level of depravity going on, the internal savagery taking place by white people against other white people. It's not only shocking, it's sickening. White people lead the nation in incest, bestiality, and rape. These are all exclusively high among white people. And this latest example of the all too typical behavior taking place daily in white homes combines two of the three. This one, by the way, is not for the timid. You've been warned. Brock Turner, Ethan Couch, the so-called affluenza teen, Spencer Bird, the former high school coach who raped and sodomized a 15-year-old, Austin Wilkerson. What do all of these guys have in common? Besides the fact they look like science experiments gone horribly wrong. They're white. They were all found guilty of rape and, in the case of Ethan Couch, multiple murder, and yet they were allowed to walk scot-free by a white judge who felt that these men's crimes simply didn't rise to the level of deserving punishment. Just take Austin Wilkerson, for example. He was a college student in Colorado who had raped a female classmate after she'd gotten drunk at a party. The victim went to court and begged the judge to punish Wilkerson to the fullest extent of the law. But she just didn't understand how the legal system works under white supremacy in America. Austin Wilkerson is white, hence he is not to be punished, even when he commits a crime against another white person. No less than the judge himself who presided over the case said that as he saw it, it was his first priority to not punish Wilkerson, rather to try to figure out whether or not the lad could be rehabilitated. Quote, "I've struggled, to be quite frank, with the idea of, do I put him in prison? Mr. Wilkerson deserves to be punished, but I think we all need to find out whether he truly can or cannot be rehabilitated." The judge is saying in plain terms that when the offender is white, the total goal is to find out how to best let him go. Now, if this were a black defendant, the entire goal would be to determine what's the harshest penalty permissible under law. None of this is new, by the way. White males have been flagrantly scoffing at rape laws in this country since time immemorial. And the judges pride themselves on giving the middle finger to rape victims of white rapists. And not just the male rapist. Female rapists who assault their students also get a slap on the wrist. But the case that has just occurred in Montana is a stark example of just how much brutality the white majority is willing to inflict upon themselves to maintain the central principle of white legal immunity from law. I had heard about this particular case days ago, but I refrained from reporting on it because the details were so sparse and sketchy that I wasn't able to give a full report. Well, in the days that have passed, this hasn't changed. So clearly the white media got their ducks in a row and decided that this was a story that was going to be collectively censored. Clearly the white media is going overboard to protect the identity of the victim, a 12-year-old girl in this case, to the point they won't even say the name of her attacker. Well, as we all know, they don't give a damn about the victims of rape. What this is about is the white media yet again doing everything that they can to help protect the collective reputation of the dominant society. A courtesy that the white media never gives to black victims of rape, by the way. Anyway, about the only thing that the Associated Press or Reuters is willing to report about the alleged crime is that the mother of the child walked in on the father while he was raping his 12-year-old daughter. And according to them, this has happened repeatedly. Well, this ought to be an open and shut case, right? Montana law requires a minimum sentence of 25 years in prison for anyone convicted of rape, incest, or sexual abuse of a child 12 years old or younger. That is mandatory under Montana law. Except, as we all know, the laws weren't written to punish white people, so that mandatory sentence part only applies to any hapless black defendants who happen to be accused of rape. Because the white degenerate who raped his own daughter was only sentenced by the judge to a mere 60 days in jail over the next 6 months. That's about 10 days a month. Yet again, another white person who only got to report to prison once or twice a week, and this after they commit some unspeakable crime. By the way, that 60 days sentence that he got, the judge has already given him credit for the 17 days he's already spent in jail. So all he has to do now is serve another 43 days over the course of 6 months. And just like with Austin Wilkerson, this judge is boldly telling the public the same old line about how all that matters is to make sure that this white thug is rehabilitated. Now, as we all know, pedophiles cannot be rehabilitated. They are hardwired to be rapists, so the only way to protect society from them is incarceration. Letting this guy go guarantees that he will do it again. But, as it turns out, the judge gave some of his reasons for giving this pedophile, incestuous rapist a pass, claiming that the rapist has no felony record. Well, as we all know, it's precisely because of judges like this that white offenders never have a felony record, because prosecutors refuse to charge white offenders with felonies and white judges refuse to uphold the verdicts against them. But it also bears noting that this judge chose to hide behind a so-called exemption to Montana's mandatory sentencing requirement, citing that the law allows for a lighter sentence if a court-appointed evaluator determines that the defendant could be better served with treatment outside of prison. Now, you know that loophole was written for white defendants, because they're the only ones who the courts have ever decided can be rehabilitated. The judge also added that the prosecutors did not challenge the result of the rapist's psychosexual evaluation. But most gallingly of all, the judge said the reason he went so light on this child rapist was because there had been a, quote, lack of input directly from the victim. Now, this is a 12-year-old child who had been raped repeatedly by her own father. There is no way to express the fear, the confusion, the personal turmoil that this child must be in. She cannot possibly understand what's been done to her, and to expect her to do anything other than point out her attacker in court is unreasonable. However, I think the worst aspect of this sickening episode came from the rape victim's own mother and grandmother. Both of these two have been on a crusade to keep the beast who raped their child from going to prison, because both the mother and even the grandmother wrote letters to the judge requesting that this child rapist not be sentenced to prison. The mother wrote that the rapist had 2 sons, and she wanted them to have an opportunity to heal the relationship with their father. The grandmother wrote that although the father's behavior was horrible, his sons would be devastated if their father was no longer a part of their lives. Neither one of these women seemed at all concerned that the very fact this even happened makes it much more likely that their sons would grow up to be sexual predators like their father. And if they grow up around this guy, given what they now know about him, it will teach them that rape isn't serious at all. This is not merely white neglect of rape. At this point, this is white aiding and abetting of it. But ultimately, the responsibility for this latest judicial outrage falls squarely on the shoulders of the so-called judge. The judges who preside over America's courts are themselves the most perverted and immoral of individuals. They don't get their jobs for being excellent jurists. They get them as political appointments because they are politically reliable to those in the dominant society who put them on the bench in the first place. How many judges sitting on the bench are rapists themselves? How many are pedophiles? How many are criminals of the lowest sort? This is why they identify with the white super predators, because in many cases the judges are ones themselves. Take, for instance, Ruth Bigot Ginsburg, who showed her whole lesbian behind when she idiotically called Colin Kaepernick's protest dumb and disrespectful. Then she got called out on it and tried to walk it back by saying that she was barely aware of the incident or its purpose, and that her comments were inappropriately dismissive and harsh. Notice that the heifer didn't say that she was wrong. The white media has tried to claim that Ginsburg had apologized for her racist insults, but that's a lie. Did anything she said sound like an apology to you? About the closest to an apology that she came was when she said, "I should have declined to respond." The only thing she should have declined was to stay on the bench. That's not an apology from her, but the white media said that it was anyway. The judge in this case, John McKeon, has announced that he'll be retiring this November as a result of all the press he's been getting, so efforts by the public to get him impeached will be pointless. By the time the state convenes a committee to decide the matter, he'll already be off to enjoy his state-sponsored pension. So, you help an incestuous child rapist get away with it, and the public is forced to pay for your retirement. This is how the law works, or not, under white supremacy. And while it disgusts me that both the child's mother and grandmother took up for the rapist instead of the victim, it doesn't surprise me. White people stay on code, even in the face of hurting themselves. To them, this is not about justice. They don't know the meaning of the word. This is about safeguarding their power and privilege, and for that they will pay any price, even the safety of their own children. White people refuse to own up to the fact that these are white judges who are allowing criminals to hurt or even kill white people with impunity. White people who are committing the crimes, and a white media who refuses to discuss it and refuses to ask white leaders to address it. White people keep looking for distractions from their own savagery that they inflict on themselves, and in the process, they have turned the entire country into a safe space for white criminality. The college campuses, high school classrooms, the workplaces, and especially white people's own homes. White rapists commit their bestial acts knowing from the very start that nothing will actually ever be done about them. They know that they're protected by the color of their skin, protected by the very people who they are attacking. This wasn't South Chicago where this occurred. It wasn't Detroit. This was Montana, a state whose population is 90% white. But it's not just Montana. It's California with Brock Turner, Colorado with Austin Wilkerson, Alabama with Spencer Bird, and all points in between. These aren't a few rogue judges who just don't get it. This is standard operating procedure. These are not miscarriages of justice. This is the white judicial system working exactly the way it's supposed to. And so, it won't be long at all before I have to report to you about yet another tragedy in the self-inflicted genocide of white-on-white crime.